What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Liam's First Look at UFC Charlotte. Thank you all for your patience. I know we were supposed to get started last night, had a bad headache, couldn't soldier on, but we got fresh coffee. We've got fresh results. I got another wrestling t-shirt on today. Wrestling t-shirt a day in May is alive and well. But I'll tell you something else. Them New York boys taught them how to wrestle, even with the gold medal around their neck. 4 takedowns for Aljamain Sterling. Never did I think I would see the day. So God bless him for it. Maybe size had a little bit to do with it, but all credit to the champion. You know, when I watched it live, thought that Cejudo got the job done, but I watched it again. You know, I think that it's a very close fight. I think that the rounds I would give to Cejudo on rewatch are 2 and 5. You know, I think Derek Cleary owes Cejudo an explanation for how he scored round 5 against him. But I think that otherwise, you know, you can make a colorable case for Aljo rounds 1, 3, and 4. So for me, it was a very, it was a very close fight. But overall, just Aljamain Sterling proves his worth once again. Underrated fighter throughout his career. And, you know, the only thing I regret about that fight is I said in January, I thought it would close a pick'em, and I thought that was appropriate. But by the end, I convinced myself that Henry was going to win. In the end, I feel like it was a pick'em, and that was appropriate. So it was a great fight. It was a great fight. No edge, though, on the Henry Cejudo side, certainly. But, guys, we got a great card in front of us. And one of the things that I want to just put out there and say, you know, if this is something you guys would be interested in, please go ahead and drop it in the comments. I'd be happy to pursue this if it's something that people want to see. If not, you know, maybe I'll just leave it on the cutting room floor. But can Jailton Almeida be a UFC champion? I feel like that's the question, that drives this card this weekend. You know, it's not a card with huge star power. Both these guys aren't pushing, 500,000 followers on Instagram and, things like that. But what I think they do bring to the table is that kind of potential for viral moments. You know, on the Bigi Boy side, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, he's like the only Surinamese fighter, right, that we are aware of, that's at a big level. He's a huge star in his home country. So he's got that, local, regional appeal. And he also is a huge power puncher. He's got the death touch, as we like to say, that proverbial death touch. But, as far as what we're dealing with Jailton Almeida, he's a really excellent ground player. And the reason that's a big deal is because it's so infrequent for the heavyweights. I think that he was at 205 looking around going, all right, there's a couple other black belts. There's a couple other guys who know what they're doing on the mat. But at heavyweight, there's really not a lot of guys leveraging their grappling skill at the highest level. And we've seen guys like Fabricio Verdum, ascend to the top by having, good striking on the feet, obviously, technical Muay Thai and some power. But really, it was an elite guard game and an elite submission skill set that got him a lot of championship wins. The wins over all the relevant, contenders that we talk about, the biggest fights. So for me, I think that that's something that we got to be very cognizant of. Jailton Almeida has like a little bit of a cheat code, right? You see him go out there against Parker Porter, who's a big fellow, right? And we saw him slim down, have a great performance over the weekend. Shout out to Parker Porter, gets the job done over Braxton Smith. That was a big win for Parker, but you saw he actually slimmed down considerably. I think he lost like 15 pounds, committed to the diet, committed to some lifestyle changes, I think, and was a little bit more diligent with his jiu-jitsu preparation, he said, and he looked great. But you saw Jailton Almeida pick up Parker Porter and then have his way with him on the ground. We've seen Jailton Almeida really not face a lot of resistance so far in his run. And what's funny is when Jailton Almeida was coming to the UFC on the Contender Series, guys, he was an underdog to Nasruddinov. And I bet, one unit at plus 185. And then I was like, no, this is crazy. I added a half unit. I bet a quarter unit on him by sub. I cashed all those bets. And then since then, I don't know why I tried to fade the guy a little bit. Just because I did feel like, he's one of these big muscle-bound guys. I felt like there was a chance he would gas out in some of these extended exchanges, but he's been very patient. that stood out to me as well. He's been picking his shots on the ground, knowing when he should go for ground and pound versus when he should just try and, take the submission when it's there. And I felt like he's been very threatening in all these positions. He's grabbing a hold of the wrist. He's doing a lot of the things that technical guys do. He's forcing guys onto all fours, just doing a lot of the right things. Yeah, my guy Royal George in the comments, I got a shout him out, says, hey, Liam, New York boys came really good last week. Ray Longo Gym deserves a lot of credit for the talent. They're bringing Division III wrestling. Yes, sir. Stand up. D3 boys in the building. Henry didn't go to college, so I guess we can't say we got the one up on the D1 fellas, but we got the gold medalists. Who are we getting next? But then, this is the other caveat you want to give on the Jairzinho Rozenstruik side. And we're just diving right into the action today. We don't give a shit. Jairzinho Rozenstruik on the other side, he's lost to a lot of the best guys. But it's not like the other fights haven't been without flaws. He gave up 2 takedowns to Junior Albini, right? We got to remember that. I don't think Junior Albini is any longer employed with the company. But let me pull up the Discord as well, because I've sent a lot of information about this fight. But as far as this fight is concerned in terms of the measurables, I just pulled it up on Tapology. We've got 6'3" for Jailton Almeida and 6'2" for Jairzinho Rozenstruik listed. I'm not sure that he's that tall. I think that Jailton's probably going to be a little bit taller than him. So it does feel like a KO or bust kind of situation when you're looking at Jairzinho. He does not have great decision optics. You think of the Alistair Overeem fight. What's the positive from that fight? The positive is that he still carries his power into the 5th round. But what's the negative? He lost virtually every minute of that fight. And again, a guy like Alistair Overeem was taking him down pretty consistently, pretty considerably. So things that I don't like for this fight is that Jairzinho is not a very practiced grappler. He doesn't have any submission wins. He doesn't have any submission losses. And yet the subline is like -105, right? So this is a fight where you're going to probably have to pay considerable chalk to be on any kind of Almeida side. So I understand why people won't want to do it. I might be interested in the under here, depending on what the best prices I can get are. I think I saw under 2-1 on the under. And just because you have 2 guys here that both have a real clear path to a finish in round 1. I just mentioned Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He definitely carries power into the 5th round. But what's his most likely winning condition? It's to win by first round knockout, almost always. And last fight, he was fighting like a madman, like dancing around, throwing the big shots. He really took a lot more chances, but he's very inconsistent. Sometimes he goes out there and I feel like when he's fighting really dangerous fighters that are really fast, he kind of slows down, really picks his shots and doesn't go after it. But when he's fighting, against people that he thinks he can knock out, he swings for the fences. The thing about Jailton is he's normally not one of these guys who you're like yelling at the screen, like Jailton shoot, Jailton shoot. He's like almost always throwing the front kick to the face, throwing the snap kick to the chest, and then taking a double leg attack. So I think that that's probably what he's going to try and do here. And I think that, maybe Jairzinho boinks him in that exchange, but like outside of that win equity, I feel like it's going to be, pretty likely that Jailton gets him down just because of his physical intangibles. He's an extremely powerful guy. And I think that he can suck the legs out from under him because I've seen a bunch of other guys do it. I think 4 UFC opponents have gotten 2 or more takedowns on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. That's just a problem when you're going against a guy like Jailton because it might only take 1, as it has against several of these guys where they don't really get back up. He kind of just beats them up on the ground. They get halfway to their feet. He takes their back and then the fight's over. So, I don't like this fight for Jairzinho Rozenstruik. You can tell by the line. Public, sharps, odds makers are kind of all agreeing that barring a knockout here, which you basically price in at about a 15% clip most of the time, in just like, two heavyweights swanging and banging, if they get into an exchange. I think that Jailton Almeida, he has been finished by knockout. So that's something you got to be cognizant of when you're laying the big chalk. It's been a while, but I think that this is the kind of fight that's like tailor-made to make him a bigger star. You know what I mean? I don't think that they're envisioning Bigi Boy fighting for the UFC title. He's been exploitable against the best strikers at times. He's been taken down by a number of individuals, like I mentioned. So for me, I feel like the UFC kind of knows that they got a fun guy that can knock out anybody, especially when he fights lower end guys in the division. He's fast. He's got some experience on the feet. He's confident there against guys that aren't. They gave him Dawkins off a knockout loss, I think. They gave him a couple guys that were maybe not in the best points in their career at the time he fought them. He's got some really notable knockouts too, guys that have been knocked out many times in their career but hadn't been knocked out recently. My guy Mark says Thiago Moreira flatline Jailton. Yeah, I mean, for sure. For sure. But I think that, Jailton just has a clear path to winning this fight. That for me is the thing I can't really ignore. And so often in his fights, he's taken it, almost the exact same way, like to a predictable script. I feel like Jairzinho is going to try and line up a big uppercut or something like that. But I feel like if he doesn't find that, it's going to be, an uphill battle for him. But if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns about that first fight, let me know. Happy to discuss it a little bit more. But otherwise, we got plenty of fights, so I'm happy to talk about the next one as well. But I think that Jailton likely to get this one done in under 1.5. I think the KO and the sub are both very likely here. I think he's going to preference the sub based on what I've seen from him, based on how he's fought before. He's very often trying to set up jiu-jitsu maneuvers. I think, I don't want to give the whole game away, but I'm pretty sure I saw like plus 300 numbers on Jailton sub in round 1. I mean, I don't think that's the worst flyer. That's basically how he's going to attack this fight, I would think. He's a big muscle-bound guy. I don't think he wants to fight for the full 15 minutes. I think he's a finisher. And, there's just some things that I like from a narrative basis here as well. A lot of Brazilian fighters on this card, a lot of really talented fighters on this card from Brazil. So I just think that there's maybe a contingency from there. And I think that they're trying to market it to that audience, but could be wrong. So it's a great fight, fun fight, but I feel like it's stylistically very favorable to Jailton. Next up, 88% on Tapology for whatever it's worth, guys. Rolling with Jailton Almeida. Almost everybody, 67% going by sub, 25% by knockout, and just 3% by decision. The thing about this fight, too, is Curtis Blades kind of had a hard time taking down Bigi Boy, if you guys remember. But that was also, Curtis was a little bit lacking the confidence on the feet there. He was kind of conflicted in the exchanges. And if you guys remember, his eye was basically shut for most of that fight. And he still was able to get the takedowns. I had Bigi Boy there, and I couldn't believe he didn't finish that fight. I was like, dude, yeah, like that's just a bag fumble. I think this is a 5-round fight, Marcel. It is a 5-round fight, but I think it's a 1-round fight, so that's why I don't think that matters too much. I think with a lot of heavyweight fights, they tend to end pretty quick. However, that's not a formality. If it does get extended, like I mentioned, we've seen Jairzinho's power carry through the fight, but could I also see Jailton, even if he's completely gassed out, just like barrel over Jairzinho when he's like trying to throw punches? I absolutely could see that. I think he could lay on him for 25 minutes if he needed to. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to control risks, pass. He's a very intentional passer. And I don't think Jairzinho is very sophisticated on the ground. So I think as soon as it gets to the ground, he's in huge trouble, to tell you the truth. I think that if you guys have watched the show for a while, you've heard me say this before. I said this about Gilbert Burns against Neil Magny, but this is a fight where I think it's a shark versus a fish. I think you have an absolute shark on the ground in Jailton Almeida, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a guy who could really wrestle. He's picking guys up with the double leg, slamming them on their ass, using it to pass to dominant positions. And from there, there's no turning back. He has jiu-jitsu that I love. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. He moves from top half guard to the mount. And when you're mounted by somebody like Jailton Almeida, who's a freaking beast of a man, you want out of there, guys. You want to not be in the fight no more. Heavyweight's different. This guy's throwing absolute hammers at you. So I think that Jairzinho Rozenstruik, if he's in that situation, will probably throw 2-3 punches back up at him. He'll get hit with a bunch of bombs. He will turn and give his back, and then the fight will be over shortly thereafter. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. Shark versus fish jiu-jitsu. I think that's how it's going to go. Jiu-jitsu. Next up, we got Anthony Smith taking on Johnny Walker. And I don't actually have the credentials pulled up for these guys, but if my memory serves, both of these gentlemen are black belts. I know that certainly both these guys have been winning a lot of fights by submission. But I think that this is an interesting one because on the one hand, Anthony Smith has kind of hero rolled his way through the division. I'm pulling it up now. Let's look at his last 5 or 6 fights. So we've got a loss to Magomed Ankalaev. I thought he looked really flat in that performance. Thought that was kind of a layup versus Ankalaev. My guy rips and picks, the marketing guru, the freaking man. He's got the Sharks versus Fish logo right there down at the bottom. Absolutely gonna have to market that up. But then we see, it was a 3-fight winning streak just prior to that for our guy Anthony Smith. Excuse me. And Ryan Spann. How well has that win aged? Okay, Ryan Spann had a good run in the division before his last fight, so obviously he's a talented guy, but he kind of has an MO when he loses, he gets finished. Either by sub or kind of by those elbows in that takedown position. I think that this is something interesting from Mark. He says, is it just me or is Smith weirdly durable considering how many times he's been finished and beat down? Yeah, he's a tough guy. I think the number one attribute for Anthony Smith is he's really tough and he wants to win. He's kind of an ornery prick in that way. You got to really beat him. You got to put him away. You got to submit him. You got to do something to him to get him out of there because he's a really tough guy. But Johnny Walker has a lot of physical advantages here. He's a little bit more dynamic. It's so interesting, this fight to me, because normally the name of the game in fighting is durability. Who could take more? Can you give, but can you take too, as my guy Best Fight Picks, Dan Levy likes to say, right? I think it's a really valid point. I think that you have to consider durability. But then on the other hand, you have to think about who could dish out lethality. I feel like one of the problems for Anthony Smith, if I could be respectfully critical, is that he doesn't always pace himself beautifully. Sometimes you see like the Glover Teixeira fight. He comes out looking like, he's a Muay Thai world champion. He's like, he's like throwing all these shots, but then he's completely gassed and he is just getting beat up by Glover. And, that must have been the ultimate confidence builder for Glover because he just beat the hell out of him for the rest of the fight. He's punching his teeth out. He's like, man, I must be the strongest guy in the division. But really, it was just Anthony Smith completely gassed himself out. And I think that's a concern because he's getting a little bit older here. He's getting a little bit longer into his career. I mean, the guy's just had a million fights, over 50 fights for Anthony Smith. It's just unbelievable amount of damage incurred. He's 34 years old, but he's an old 34 in my humble opinion. Not in terms of his movement. He's still moving okay. He's still pretty fast, and he could definitely win this fight. It's a light heavyweight for sure. But, what's interesting is from J-Bone, thoughts on each guy's grappling. Man, I had been on the Johnny Walker's grappling sucks train because that Nikita Krylov fight was so gross, the grappling between the two. And I have to give it a little bit more credit the more we see Nikita Krylov just dominating light heavyweights. I can't really hold that one against him as much. I think overall, his game took some adjustment to moving to SBG Ireland with John Kavanagh. Was it like the greatest career move? I don't know. That's for other people to judge. But I think that now he's getting much better at jiu-jitsu. I do think that people forget that John Kavanagh is good at jiu-jitsu. Conor McGregor, especially in his heyday, was very good at jiu-jitsu when he was more diligent. So, not to say he had the best cardio, not to say that was his main focus in life, but just like they had clever, good jiu-jitsu. They had interesting things they would do. Conor got some submission wins regionally, and he also threatened a bunch of, good moves in the UFC, passed guard in interesting ways, especially the Dennis Seaver fight right to the mount. Just interesting things. So overall, I don't think that they have bad jiu-jitsu. And when you have somebody like Johnny Walker, he's got really unique attributes. He's extremely long. I'm going to, again, refer to Tapology here. I believe he's got a 4-inch reach advantage if memory serves. No, it's even more than that. They're listing 76 inches for Anthony Smith compared to 82 inches for Johnny Walker. He's also 2 inches taller, 6'6", compared to 6'4" for Smith. He's 3 years younger than Anthony Smith, but almost 4 when you consider Anthony Smith turning 35, in a few months, and Johnny Walker just turned 31. So for me, I think Johnny Walker just has the more dangerous, lethal tools, I feel like. His durability is the huge question mark, but he's been fighting much more conservatively. And I think that's to his advantage. I think his chin is a liability, so he's got to protect it. He's got to fight smart. Sometimes that'll mean leveraging wrestling, grappling, leaning into guys. Anthony Smith has good jiu-jitsu fundamentally. I don't think that's the way to beat him, but I do think letting him wear down a little bit, maybe making him miss a little bit, making him chase you a little bit, trying to tire him out. I think that's a good idea. I think chipping away at his legs like Johnny Walker's been doing recently. Yeah, absolutely, Rips. His biggest liability certainly is his chin. Shout out to everybody in the chat, by the way. Appreciate each and every one of you guys taking time out of your day. Got 39 people rocking with us live, so I say cheers to each and every one of you guys. J-Bone, George, Mark, Marcel, appreciate all you guys for your commentary. Only take I got is UFC likes Lionheart. They made Walker leave in his gear last time out. Yeah, man, you're not kidding. But again, when I'm talking about these marketable Brazilians, Johnny Walker, you guys, I feel like people forget this guy was like, they wanted to strap a rocket ship to his back and send this guy to the freaking moon because he was getting highlight finishes. He was having fun out there. He was doing all this crazy stuff. And then he did the worm and hurt his shoulder. And that it soured their relationship, it was tough. But overall, you look at the losses for Johnny Walker, and really they haven't aged too poorly, in my humble opinion. Let's just go back and take a look. He loses to Jamal Hill via first-round knockout. Guys, I bet bigly on Jamal Hill there. I mean, I just thought that was an obvious one. Jamal Hill is a violent man. He is not there to be kind to you. He's not there to have a fun fight or anything like that. He's a vicious, violent man, and he put a hole through his head. That was one of the worst, most vicious knockouts you'll ever see. But that's also Jamal Hill looking for a title shot, pissed off about the Paul Craig fight still, blasting a hole through somebody's head. There's nothing more to it than that. Thiago Santos fight, that was a gross fight that went to decision. A little bit of inactivity there, a little bit of too little, not throwing enough. But I think that, what we've seen from Johnny in his last 2 fights, guys were trying to bring a little bit more of that wrestling and grappling to him, and he leveraged some of his physical assets to win those positions. Against Paul Craig, he just threw hammer fists and knocked him out. I had Paul Craig there. I thought he was going to submit him. I thought he was the better jiu-jitsu player. Didn't end up mattering. The physical advantages and the intangibles came into play. Against Iwan Cutelaba, who would you say is a better wrestler? I think everybody would agree Iwan Cutelaba is a little bit better wrestler than Johnny Walker. Well, it didn't seem to matter much there, right? He ends up tapping out in the first round. So Johnny Walker's cardio is not great, to my guy Moises' credit. We have seen that's why I think the Krylov fight was so disgusting in the grappling. He was slowing down there. Krylov, though he was slowing down, was able to keep a better pace, was able to manage his fatigue better. And so he ended up getting the win there. But then we see the Corey Anderson fight. I mean, guys, Corey Anderson, for all intents and purposes, looked great in Bellator. He really did not look bad in any of his fights. Ended up losing a couple close ones, but Corey Anderson's proved himself to be a top light heavyweight in the world. And, obviously I'm not saying like top one or something like that, but I'm saying, is he a top 5, top 10 guy? Yeah, I think he is. Certainly at his absolute peak, at his absolute prime. So that was a fight where, it exposed the chin of Johnny Walker to the UFC audience. It's still a concern, but I do think he's got a lot. Oh, Moise, is this true? Well, then cheers to Corey. Overtime. He got his bag. He fought for some titles, and be great to see him back in the UFC. Let's see what else people have to say. Jeff says, I don't think they like Smith after he missed weight as the backup. That seems fair. But he is still a commentator. What's up, Liam? My guy, Fight Talk. Hey, brother. How you doing? I think overall, I'm leaning towards this fight to end by sub one way or the other. I think both these guys have been grappling a lot more recently. Don't think either one of them want to take as much damage, but I think both of them can get knocked out here. That's the truth. I think one or the other is going to force the grappling here. I think Anthony Smith is very confident in his grappling. I think he's very confident in his wrestling. And I think that he would be happy to try and leverage that against Johnny Walker, especially, if he thinks he could slow him down over time, which we have seen. And we've seen Anthony Smith submit a number of light heavyweights that he's better than in the first round. He's got a good triangle choke. He's got a good series. So I think that Johnny Walker, he's still got highlight reel potential on the feet. We don't know how he's going to approach any fight. I feel like with John Kavanaugh, he's been approaching it with a lot more risk aversion, but he's still got the physical tools. And if at any point he explodes with a huge shot, he could absolutely knock out Anthony Smith here, who is a good fighter. But again, just Johnny Walker's got explosive power. He knocked out a lot of guys that he was not as good as technically on the way up. Think the Khalil Roundtree fight. He was an underdog there. Have absolutely blasted him out of there. So I think that Johnny Walker, maybe that confidence to go out there and swing like that has been diminished a little bit. But I also, if you guys haven't seen it on my Twitter page, I repost it every so often. It's the reaction video. He's like, guys, I go to sleep in the fight, so it didn't go so good. Like, it's the funniest video. And, he's a good sport about it all. It's a funny guy, and he's got a personality. He's a marketable guy. And at any point, I think he strings together 2-3 wins, he could fight for a UFC title. So whether or not the promotion loves the guy, I don't think is a huge deal to me here. I think he's still a dangerous fighter. Next up, we've got, I gotta disclose my biases, right? I always talk about my biases when we got the New York fighters, when we got, maybe a Division III wrestler or something like that. Shout out to Baldwin Wallace and them guys representing this year, D3 in the house. But as far as I'm concerned, you look at Daniel Rodriguez and Ian Garry, and it's a great fight. It's a fun fight. I now messed up my hair completely, but I think that this is fun matchmaking. Got two guys that are talented guys looking to get really their name out there on the radar. So featured bout here, moving up the main card. And I think Ian Garry, he had that little bit of a scare last time out. He got touched a little bit. But yeah, my guy Moise, damn Moise, you're always on the button, my guy. You're one step ahead of me here. He says Garry versus Jack Grant showed that Garry can wrestle. I think, he has an underrated wrestling and grappling game. I think that Daniel Rodriguez is a good fighter. I think he's very competent in all positions. But I do think we saw Neil Magny, what was I saying about Neil Magny when he was going to fight Gilbert Burns? I said it was a shark versus a fish. And Neil Magny went out there and pace grappled this guy and submitted him in the third round. And, I think that was his first submission loss, but I ended up betting on Neil Magny at an insane price, just again for the division. It was like plus 700 or something, plus 680 or something for him to win inside the distance. Just an absurd line. But for all intents and purposes, what you're seeing from Daniel Rodriguez is he's a guy who's had a lot of fights in his life. He talks about all the fights he's been in prison and all this stuff. That doesn't come without a cost. He trains really hard. He goes to a lot of boxing gyms. He gets around. He works a lot on his hands, especially on his skills. But I don't know that he's spending all that time in the wrestling and grappling and refining some of those nuances for the absolute highest level at the highest pace. And so I think that Ian Garry, in his last fight, he was going for the finish until the absolute bitter end, and he ended up getting it, late. So I think that he's got the skills to take this to the ground if he needs to. And I don't think people are necessarily always taking that into account. I think that he has the ability to find a sub if he gets the fight to the ground. I think especially later on in the fight, he will have the fresher cardio. So for me, this is a question of, can Ian Garry avoid getting knocked out, which is a real honest question here. He's got a dangerous puncher in front of him. And then the other question is, can Ian Garry leverage, some of the physical intangibles that he has? Let's pull up the height and reach dynamics here. We got 2 inches of height on the Ian Garry side. It says an even reach here at 74 inches, but I feel like the guy who's going to look longer on the night is Ian Machado Garry. Also, 11 years younger, guys. 11 years younger for Ian Garry. One of the things that we talk about with young fighters is the recoverability. Sometimes they get hit, sometimes they get hurt, but they normally have that recoverability. I think that we've seen Daniel Rodriguez getting chipped away at a little bit. I thought that the Leech probably deserved to win that fight. I thought that was maybe the wrong decision. I'd have to rewatch it to see if my opinion changes. But on the night, I was stunned that they gave that the way of Daniel Rodriguez. And for me, this is the kind of fight where the rubber's going to meet the road for both guys. If Daniel Rodriguez wants to get back into contention, he's got a lot of wins in the UFC. But if he wants to get back, towards the top of the division as an older guy in the division, he's really got to do something impressive in this fight. He's got to go out there and get a big win, big finish. And I think that's a huge ask against somebody like Ian Garry on the way up. Talented guy. Everybody from his own gym raves about him, about the work ethic. Don't tell me about the skills and the talent. Everybody's got talent. They tell you about how hard the kid works and how he's always there first to practice and all this. Hey, that's what I want to hear about the guys that I'm betting on, that they really want to win. And he's young. He really wants to win. Nobody's beaten him yet. And when he's faced adversity, he's responded well throughout his career. So I think he's a tough kid. I think he's a talented kid. I think we're doing it again, guys. 5-0 in the UFC. Ian Garry, I think he's doing it, just like Conor McGregor did. Watch this space. Next up, Tim Means, the Dirty Bird, taking on Alex Morono. Oh boy. This is a trickier one to call because you got, obviously you'd have to lean towards the younger guy here in Alex Morono, but he's coming off that brutal knockout loss. I want to see when that took place. I feel like it was recently. December 10th. Yeah, so basically a 5-month turnaround here from that brutal counter right hand, boink over the top from Santiago Ponzinibbio in round 3. And then, like Moyes always says, the duality of a loss, Santiago dealt one out, and then he was on the receiving end of one from Big Mouth Kevin Holland. So the game always comes around. But, yeah, Alex Morono, he was putting together a little bit of a run there, folks. He beat Matthew Semmelsberger, Mickey Gall, David Zawada, Donald Cerrone. I mean, the Donald Cerrone win can't really read much into that. But then, we go back. The loss via knockout 1 to Chaos Williams, who had a really tough time against that UFC newcomer over the weekend. I'm not sure he won that fight. I'd have to rewatch it. And then Anthony Pettis, that fight, he got hurt really bad in that fight. So Morono's chin has never been his selling point, man. He's a tough guy, but he keeps his chin right up in the air. And I truly think that in the early going of this fight, Tim Means is very live to win this fight by knockout. He's a big hitter. He's a powerful guy, throws big knees to the body. He can do a lot of damage in the first round, but he is slowing down. He's been slowing down in a lot of his fights. I think the guy who can push a pace for longer is Morono. And I do think that he may have an advantage here if he's able to get the fight to the ground consistently. Oh my God, Mark, that's brutal. But yeah, I hear you. I hear where you're coming from. It's a vicious knockout. You know what Chaos did really well when he first came to the UFC? He did it to Abdul Razak as well. He found the timing when they were throwing the kick, and he just put him right in the box. I think that Gold Caps actually struck a nerve with me here. Morono by sub. I think that's his best path. I think that's how he's going to pursue this fight. I think he's going to go out there, bang it out on the feet a little bit, and if it gets dicey at all, he's going to go take down right away. I think that's exactly how I expect him to approach this fight. Should be a great scrap. But, you just look at the Tim Means side. He's had so many fights. He's been submitted a number of times, and he's coaching wrestling. He's got a lot of things going on. So it would be admirable for him to come back and get this win, but I think he's probably got to do it in the first 7.5 minutes, and he's probably got to do it by knockout. Next, Matt Brown versus Court McGee. Guys, I went to UFC Columbus, took it in with my own 2 eyes, and I saw my guy Matt Brown get that fight taken from him. I got to go back and rewatch the Brian Barberena fight on TV because, TV is a different experience than live. But I never rewatched it. I thought it was brutal, man. I bet on Matt Brown. They're small, but I think that, Matt Brown, he's another one of these guys that he's very dangerous. He lives a great lifestyle. He's helping our guy Mark Coleman. He's doing the saunas with him. He's working out with him, all this stuff. Great guys up there working really hard too. Ohio's got a lot of tough people. I'll just say that, a lot of good skilled fighters as well. But I do think that for Matt Brown, he's just having a really hard time at 42 years of age, pushing the pace that you need for the full 15 minutes. And who could blame him? It's a really hard ask. Speaking of 42, we got 42 people rocking with us live. So appreciate each and every one of you guys. And please go ahead and light up that chat with questions. I just saw my guy Jake drop a question. I'm going to address that as soon as possible as well. But on the other side, you got Court McGee. And why is this fight being made by the UFC? I mean, it's being made because it's winnable for both guys. Court can push a pace. He can lean on you. He can take you down. He can make it a grind. He can go strike for strike with you. But he can also get knocked out, right? And we just saw that in his last fight. I think a lot of people were banking on the fact that he doesn't get knocked out frequently, that he's got a lot of UFC wins. But I think he's fought a pretty low level of comp overall, especially in his step up in competition. I feel like he normally loses. And I feel like this is still a tough fight for him. Matt Brown, at his peak would have been a tough fight for him. I feel like that would have been a fight that he could have won by a greasy decision, but it's also a fight where he could have gotten knocked out brutally because Matt Brown knocks people out viciously with elbows, knees, punches, kicks, everything. He could do everything and hurt people. And people forget that he went on a 7-fight win streak in the UFC, finishing people, winning UFC main events against Eric Silva. Matt Brown was a freaking man at one point. So he's immortal for a reason. He sticks around. I thought he won his last fight watching in person live. I thought they did him wrong in his hometown at UFC Columbus. And I'm just glad to see he's doing one more. I think they matched him up appropriately with a guy who can win this fight, can maybe get get him through this fight without hurting him too bad. But I think that Court McGee, he's coming back again off that Jeremiah Wells performance where it wasn't like he looked bad. He just was an older guy who's a little bit slower, taking it all in against the guy who moves way too fast for him. And I thought Wells was a pretty easy pick there. Despite the fact that we didn't know about the cardio dynamics, I just thought, the speed and the movement was too much. And for Court, he's 21-11. He's got a good record on paper. He beat Ramiz Brahimaj, but Ramiz kind of gassed out really bad in that fight and was going for the finish in round one and just didn't really have it. Claudio Silva is notoriously one of the absolute worst gassers in the UFC. Carlos Condit. People forget that fight where he didn't even attempt any wrestling. If you don't attempt wrestling against Matt Brown, it's going to be a lot harder to gas him out. He can go strike for strike. He hits the heavy bag all the time, So that I think is a big difference maker here. He's going to have to go for takedowns. He's going to have to mix that in my opinion, to gas him out. Then he lost a decision to Sean Brady. That's admirable. He didn't get submitted there by a guy who's really talented on the ground. So I think his ground game definitely checks out, and it's very strong. Diego Lima, he lost a split decision there. I mean, are you kidding me, guys? I mean, that's concerning. That's a concerning one. Alex Garcia, he beats by unanimous decision. Loses to Sean Strickland by decision. Fair enough. This is in 2017. So the guy doesn't have that much activity either. Let's just look at the age dynamics here. I think it's 38 and 44, or 38 and 42 off the top of my head. Yeah, 38 and 42 for these two guys. Very old combined age here. And guys, we know from the book Fightnomics, when guys get over the age of 38, it's when they start to get knocked out more frequently. So I think somebody's probably getting finished here, and I think Matt Brown is probably going to win this fight by knockout, if I had to guess. That's my opinion. Next up, Carl Williams taking on Chase, the Vanilla Gorilla Sherman. But before we get into it, let's talk to the chat, guys. That's what we're here for on these live streams, especially. Want to make sure that we interact as well. And my guy Jake asked a really pertinent question. He says, how do you handle second-guessing your picks? I've talked myself out of a couple profitable picks, but I let other cappers sway my bet. I think number one, for me, this is part of my new process for making sure that I get my own thoughts established before I talk to anybody else, before I do any other kind of breakdown, anything like that. Try and just first establish what are my gut level feelings. And sometimes I don't have one. Sometimes it takes research to form an opinion on these fights, but other times I do have a strong gut level opinion. So what I like to do is keep track of that over time. Go with what I'm feeling right now and kind of take note of that. Then as the week progresses, I do some research. I find out more information. I watch more footage. I review the tape notes that I already have. I review the information that I've compiled. I look at their trends. I look at all the information that I can. Maybe I'll even listen to a couple other educated opinions. Certainly, I have a lot of smart people, educated people, sharp cappers, all these things reach out to me. They ask me, hey, man, what do you think of this? Hey, are you planning on betting this? Hey, what do you think of this line? Hey, should I shop for equity here? So these are the kind of things people are reaching out. I'm always trying to figure it out for myself. I'm always trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this fight. But sometimes, my first read will be the opposite of my read by the end of the week, And in those cases, my new goal is to try not to bet it. It can always trap you. It can always get you with a line. It's a psychology game. Gambling companies are well aware of this. Understanding what lines are tempting to you is important. Understanding what lines you're tending to hit at and what lines you tend to whiff at, that's important. It's about pattern recognition at the end of the day. And oftentimes we're suckers for the same bad bet. For example, Verna Jandiroba, right? Great fighter with a lot of submission wins on her record. And I thought she was going to absolutely dominate the fight. But I bet a half a unit on her money line and a quarter unit on her to win by submission. And why was that the wrong approach? I can break it down because I now have the benefit of hindsight, but this is a mistake I've made before. So now I'm trying to use that pattern recognition to save myself money. So I'll bring you guys into the handicapping process here for me personally. But for me, Verna Jandiroba should have been a bigger money line bet, and her sub bet should have been smaller or should not have existed. And the reason I feel this way in retrospect is because I like to see proof of concept before I bet on something to happen, unless the odds are very, very long. So in this case, the odds weren't quite long enough. It was less than 5-1 by the time that I got to it. I think it opened at plus 525 or plus 550 offshore. So I think if you hit that earliest number, it was a fine and respectable bet. But by the time I got to it, it's all the way down under 5-1. And I still liked it because Verna's so dangerous. And I thought she's going to get the positions that she wants in this fight. And that read was correct. However, we've seen Marina Rodriguez in a ton of terrible positions with great grapplers, and she's never been submitted. So I didn't have proof of concept, and it wasn't a huge number. I shouldn't have played it. But Verna to get the takedowns, I had proof of concept. Verna to go out there and push the grappling pace, I had proof of concept. Verna to be the more physically imposing fighter, I did a lot of due diligence before the fight. I had photos of each of them on the scales before the fight, leading up, all this stuff. So I had a lot of research and due diligence done. That should have been a bigger money line bet on Verna, and it should not have been a prop bet there. I shouldn't have gotten cute with it. There's times to play the prop, but there's also times when you want to just take the easier, take the path of least resistance. Just like fighters, you got to do the same thing as a capper. So that would be my number one piece of insight. Go find out where you're winning. It starts with tracking your bets. It starts with tracking your results and seeing where you're doing well, where you're doing poorly. I love BetMMA.tips personally because it takes me back and it shows me my stats. It shows me what betting odds I'm doing well at, what weight classes I'm doing well at, what, prop categories I'm doing well at, all these different things. And so for me, it's been very helpful as a resource, but I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can track your results. That would be, you could just do pen and paper. If it's more comfortable for you, you don't have to show anybody. You could just do it for yourself. But I think that it helps with accountability, but it also helps with accounting. It shows you all these things that you might not know. What's your ROI? What's your return? Are you doing well with underdogs, or is there a certain odds range that you're just not doing well at? I could bring up my own BetMMA.tips for a second and just talk through, some of the different things that you notice. So number one, right off the bat, my ROI on slight underdogs is minus 1%, right? So as of now, on a sample size of 205 picks, I've gotten 91% correct, which is 44% of the time. So I've lost 5.05 units betting on slight underdogs. So it's not like I'm getting washed on slight underdogs, but that's not where I've been doing very well. It's certainly not where I've gotten the bulk of my success. I've been struggling in that range. I'm not beating that range consistently enough. If you want to bet slight underdogs, you want to win around 50%. If I'm winning around 50% and I'm getting plus money, it's going to be hard to beat me. If I'm that I think is where you want to be at. But for me, I'm not quite hitting there at slight underdogs. However, where am I making money? I have a 35% ROI on big underdogs, 142 picks, 47 correct. That's 33% of my picks are correct. So I'm not getting it right every time. I'm not getting it right most of the time, but I'm getting it right at long enough odds, enough of the time that I'm making a big return on my investment. I'm willing to take a big risk and say, hey, this result is only supposed to happen 20% of the time. And I could point to my most recent betting results, right? I lost on Diego Lopez. I took a shot there. I bet plus 660. And Dana White paid him his win bonus. He didn't get the win there, but what did he do? He went out there and he attacked for the entire 15 minutes. I thought to myself, this is a theoretical bet. How can you get a guy, two guys coming in on short notice? Evloev was brought in on short notice to fight Bryce Mitchell. And then Bryce Mitchell gets replaced with this guy. It was just UFC mismatch. Like, let's take one guy from here and there and everywhere and put them all together. And so for me, I thought to myself, Evloev has slowed down in round 3 before. He's gotten hurt, tagged on the feet before. He's a good fighter. Make no mistake about it. But how could we not, expect that this guy is going to come in and offer resistance? He's talented on the ground. That's where Evloev wants to be. That's where he wants to take the fight. And that's where he's best. I also bet the fight ends by sub at plus 360. So I lost both those bets. But did I cry in my coffee over those bets? No, I did not, because those bets I feel really good about. I make those bets again. And if you make those bets over the long term, in my opinion, you'll win. If you're betting on a really competitive global division like featherweight, bantamweight, you're getting plus 660 on somebody that's as talented as Diego Lopez proved to be in that fight, and as closely, contested with somebody like Mosar on short notice as he was. I think that goes in and of itself to betting theory. You have to know going in plus 660. I'm not going to cash this every time. I don't want to bet a huge amount necessarily every time on this, unless I really think it's a misprice. But I was confident enough that it was mispriced to take a shot. And I'll tell you, watching the live market throughout that fight, they did not deal him again at plus 660 throughout the fight. So I thought that was also proof of concept as well. Mosar went down considerably in the live odds, and people on the Pub Sports Radio stream were taking those odds. So shout out to them. Glad people cashed. But always, you got to bet the number, not the fighter. Shout out to my guy Big Show Picks as well from PSR in the building. We got a lot of great people here. My guy, Vamshi Mani, says, I just started betting in February. I like your opinions. I agree, and came to a conclusion. It's very important not to listen to other opinions as they do sway you. I feel one should do tape study. I think that's a great idea if you know what you're looking at. The one other thing that I've learned from doing this for a while is I used to just take notes and I write down every single thing I saw. And now what I try and do is distill what's really important information, because there's so much to take in on a week-to-week basis. You can overload yourself with information. So things like, do they dig underhooks? Can they get back up to their feet? Have they faced adversity? It's almost like finding out this list of questions for yourself, these check boxes, things that you want to know. Does this fighter meet all these criteria? That after the fact, that if this bet does not go my way, I still will feel good about it. That's my goal for this week and moving forward. And I just think that that's a good thing to aspire to. One of the things I strived for last year, and I stressed always, was more good bets and fewer bad bets. That's always the goal. What are the bad bets I made? And analyze what you did last week. Hey, that's why we're talking about that bet. Where there's some bets like the Diego Lopez one I'd make again. There's some bets like the Joseph Holmes one that I want to puke in my hands that I made that bet. I literally said to my editor after I had already turned in my article, I was like, I'm switching my pick from Claudio Hiberio KO2 to Joseph Holmes KO2. You guys can see it on my Twitter. Put it up with the sad clown emoji. It was just absolutely brutal. Because sometimes when you overthink something, to Jake's point, you can really lose sight of what at the end of the day is the easiest read on the fight. Another example from last week. By the time that the fight came around, I didn't end up betting on it, thank goodness, because it's still Phil Hawes at the end of the day, and I couldn't bring myself to bet him. But I ended up thinking that Phil Hawes was the value side because a lot of really smart people told me he was, and they convinced me with arguments, which is, it's good that they're able to make convincing arguments in these things, but you also have to be cognizant of trusting your own reads and trusting your own gut, because sometimes you'll see things that other people aren't seeing. And for me, my first gut level reaction, and if you guys remember the show that we did, it was saying I thought they were trying to cash out Phil Hawes. Despite the fact that he was in his hometown in New Jersey, just Alaskarov seemed like a matchup where they didn't care about Phil Hawes. They're turning him around on short notice after hurting his knee, after getting knocked out brutally by Dolidze. I thought that Phil Hawes was basically live to win the fight by knockout in round 1, but I thought it was ultimately going to play out where somebody was probably going to get knocked out, and that's never a good situation for Phil Hawes in these fights. Brutal finish there once again for Alaskarov. But when you look at something long enough, you could talk yourself into it. You say, oh man, Phil Hawes, he's got the good wrestling. He's got those takedowns, he's looking good physically. Maybe you could get a hold of him. Alaskarov, he struggled against this guy. You could talk yourself into anything if you think about it long enough. But that's why I like to get my gut level reaction, get my research. If they both line up, boom, off to the races. If they don't, I got to really have compelling evidence to go in. So appreciate all the great questions, guys. A lot of really smart questions here. A lot of smart points being made by people in the comments as well. Call me whatever, says Liam. Analysis, one of the sharpest in the game. Truly appreciate you, my brother. Means a lot. Get a lot of support from you guys. So God bless. Appreciate each and every one of you. As well, we got Big Show Pick says, if you take 6 shots, you ain't going to hit the bullseye all 6 times. That's right. But just one and you can change your life. So that's the goal, man. Always, something, for example, right? Looking at my track betting from last weekend, what's a bet that I don't regret, but that I needed to have more bets in addition to was Frevola by sub. My read all week was Matt Frevola is going to get the job done. He was, I thought, the more dangerous guy in every position. I thought that in the early going, he starts faster. He starts with explosive shots right off the rip. And I thought that his durability is the only thing that's let him down in the past. I think that Matt Frevola, he's a killer. He's got great submissions. He's got great takedowns. He's a very talented guy, but sometimes doesn't fight to his strengths. I feel like what we've seen from him recently, he's been fighting to his strengths. He's been fighting with a lot of confidence. He's got big power in his hands. He's got big power in his kicks. And Drew Dober, I thought people weren't realizing that he was taking a lot of clean shots in that fight, and his face was starting to change gradually, and then all at once he got knocked down. I was going absolutely buck wild on the Pub Sports radio stream because by the time the fight went off, I did end up betting Matt Frevola. I did end up betting him on the money line at plus 188. I wanted that plus 200 number. I tried to get greedy and wait it out. Didn't quite get there, but ended up taking the plus 188. And I feel like Matt Frevola was just an extremely dangerous guy. And he deserved that kind of credit. He deserved that kind of respect because everybody said last time, he's got to go out there and take this guy down. And he didn't, and he knocked him out brutally in the first round. So I said, you know what, at a certain point, we got to trust Frevola and let him do whatever the hell he thinks he needs to do to win these fights. Most of the time he knows. And against Jalen Turner, by the way, he was smart enough to go out there and get the takedowns and go out there and get on top. And so I just feel like Matt Frevola getting that ranking, well-deserved. But my betting slate should have had Matt Frevola money line, ITD, and the sub prop at 10-1, because that's still a misprice, and I'd play it again next time. If they price Matt Frevola by sub at 10-1, because guys, I'll tell you what, if Drew Dober, had turned over, to his belly, that fight goes a different way, and Matt Frevola wins it by sub, and I cash out big on that one. So he does have the skills. He did get it to the positions I thought he would early, and he finished on the ground. So Matt Frevola is just a killer, man, and deserves that respect. Huge respect to the guy. Next up, we've got a fight to talk about here with Carl Williams and Chase Sherman, and there's not a ton to talk about here. I think that, Chase Sherman, he's got a lot of UFC experience, guys, but I like to look at trends. I like to look at performance over time. Would you believe me if I told you that Chase Sherman is 1-9 as a UFC underdog? I got to say to my guy, Vamshi, it's about numbers, brother. No worries. I think that Drew Dober, he's a great fighter, man. He'll be back. He's a freaking very talented lightweight. He's got huge power. He's got great skills, but I felt like people were sleeping on how good Matt Frevola is just because, he's been knocked out before. it's a dangerous sport. It's a dangerous game. Lightweights have big power. They're not playing games out there. But Matt Fravola's done everything in his power to prove he's ready for the higher level. And Patty Pimblett don't want that Matt Fravola smoke. He do not want that Matt Fravola smoke. Dober relied a little bit too much on his chin, says Mark. Guys like Dober and Luque don't use head movement, eventually get their chin cracked. I said the exact same thing in the lead up to the fight, and people did not believe me. People never believe you on chins until it's too late. Although I did not see it coming with my guy Vicente Luque. Certainly not that bad. But I did think that the Jeff Neal fight was just throwing him out to the wolves after Bilal Muhammad. Also, shout out to my guy, Big Show Picks. Wasn't on my official track betting slate, but if you guys watched along with Pub Sports Radio every week, we do the live stream on YouTube, and did shout out Kennedy by sub there plus 1,600. Did shout out the fight ends by sub plus 850. A couple other fun bets along the way. Yan Shannon by KO. A couple of us talked about it on the stream. I cashed that one as well. So just a couple great bets along the way, but overall, just want to clean it up this week. That's the goal. More good bets, fewer bad bets, always. And I think that in this case, Chase Sherman is a bet that a lot of people are going to take because it's a heavyweight fight. And Carl Williams, he slowed down a tiny bit in some of his fights. But I think overall, Carl just projects much higher. He's a good wrestler. He can go out there and take guys down. Jimmy Lawson, guy that wrestled at Penn State, purple belt from Tom DeBlas. He was getting taken down in the first round there, just absolutely dominated by Carl Williams. He's done the same thing since arriving in the UFC, getting a lot of takedowns, staying in the top position, returning guys to the mat when they get back to their feet. And I think that Carl Williams, he just has too much physicality here for Chase Sherman. I think Chase Sherman, against guys like Alexander Romanov, who's been, checked a little bit at the higher ends of this division, he got absolutely ragdolled there, taken down. He was the biggest underdog in the history of the UFC for that fight. Now he's fighting Carl Williams. He's only plus 300. I think Carl Williams is going to take him down, do whatever he wants to him, get on top, and potentially find his first UFC finish as well. Then Carl Williams by sub at plus 400. It's not a tempting price, but it's probably going to cash. Cody Stamann taking on Douglas Silva de Andrade. Oh boy, I need to sip coffee for this one, boys. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, everybody, appreciate you guys for watching. Still got 41 people rocking with us live. 1 hour down. A lot of great fights still to talk about. Cody Stamann, 21-5-1. Hasn't really lost to anybody but very good fighters. But he's got a really tough assignment here in Douglas Silva de Andrade. I think this fight's around a pick'em, and I think that that's probably appropriate. You look at Douglas Silva de Andrade. He fought last time out against Said Nurmagomedov, loses a unanimous decision there, but pretty spirited effort, gave a good account of himself, I thought, especially for a gentleman of his age. Prior to that, ends up getting Sergey Morozov out of there, club and sub, beat him up, bloodied his face, then took his back, finished him brutal fashion in round 2. Gaetano Pirelli, he absolutely sent him to the shadow round. It was brutal. Lerone Murphy, very talented guy that projects high in the UFC. UFC really likes the guy. Doesn't fight all that much, but really tough guy to beat. Tough guy stylistically, big fellow as well. I believe that fight was at featherweight, and now we've seen him move back down to bantamweight, where this fight I think is taking place. Let me just double check that. Yeah, this is going to take place at bantamweight. He lost to Piotr Jan via corner stoppage. I mean, Piotr Jan, just an absolutely brutal fight for anybody to take at bantamweight or any other weight class. And he beat Renan Barão at featherweight, a former bantamweight champion. So Douglas Silva de Andrade is absolutely fantastic. He beat Marlon Vera back in the day, lost to Rob Font via guillotine choke in a fight where he was otherwise having some success, landing big shots on Rob Font. That was a great win by Rob Font. He lost to Zubaira Tuhugov. So what's his bad UFC loss? He doesn't have one either. Both these guys extremely talented. So Stamann's a little bit younger. He's got good boxing. He's got good wrestling. But I think he could get hurt. I think he could get finished. I think he is a little bit more susceptible in the jiu-jitsu. I think Douglas is a little bit more crafty. He has a little bit more vet savvy. He's got some more wins in the organization. And like I said, I feel like this is a night for Brazil. So the slight underdog here in Douglas Silva de Andrade, he's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage, a 1-inch height advantage. I don't think he's going to easily be out wrestled here. So I think that this is a fight where he could lose a grinding decision, but I think that he could also win this fight by finish or win a decision. So I think that more often than not, Staman's going to have to fight a really smart 15 minutes, or he's going to have to knock him out with some tight boxing. He's got an older fighter, especially older for the division in front of him. But I think that barring that, I expect Douglas is just really tricky, man, and he can win this fight anyway. So, yeah, I'm looking a little bit more towards the Douglas side here, personally. Next up, we've got Carlos Ulberg taking on Ihor Potieria. It seems like everybody cannot get them enough of Carlos Ulberg right now. He's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage, a 1-inch height advantage, and he is going to be 6 years older here. Sneaky 6 years older. However, he is 32 years of age, so he's not old by any means. Certainly not for the light heavyweight division. Ihor's very young. Common opponent, right? Negumerianu. Nikolai Negumerianu. The guy made me some monies, but he also got sent to the absolute shadow realm by Carlos Ulberg. Ulberg's a big hitter, powerful puncher, can take guys out of the fight. He's got good hooks. He's got good punching. He's got pretty good mechanics, but I am not sold that he's got stellar grappling. I don't know that we've seen him tested very much in the wrestling and the grappling portion of the fight. Looking at Ihor Poteria's record, he is 6-0 career to the submission. I think that that's something I'm definitely cognizant of here in this fight. I don't know what Ulberg's ground game is going to look like. I believe he's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we haven't seen very much offensive use of that to the best of my recollection. So I'm going to have to revisit some tape there. Okay. Mark is saying Ulberg minus 275 was a max bet for me, 40% ROI on a fraudulent Ihor. Interesting. Okay. So I don't think that Ihor is, a great fighter, but I just don't know what I'm getting from Ulberg all the way. The win over Shogun, the dancing around after it, I didn't much care for it, but I also can't really fault him. I mean, whatever. Do what you got to do. He got the win on Contender Series as well over Sadowski. I thought Sadowski was going to beat him there, but again, Sadowski ended up getting finished in the first round. He ended up proving the more fraudulent of the two. Otherwise, this guy doesn't have many credible wins on his record. Does have a lot of fights, a lot of experience. So he hasn't really been beating the best guys, but he does have more MMA experience than our guy Ulberg, so I think that that's worth paying attention to at least. Ulberg probably projects higher, though, just as a prospect. He's a dangerous puncher. So I'm not exactly sold on what to do here. I'm going to have to look more into this fight. My guy Mark definitely, making me want to consider the Ulberg side a little more closely. But I have seen a lot of love for Ulberg on Twitter this week, so I want to proceed with caution. I don't want to rush in, hand over heels for the guy, because I do think he's easy to like here. On Tapology right now, 91% of the votes going with our guy Ulberg, only 9% on Poteria. So, let's see if this line continues to run in the direction of Ulberg as it has been so far. Next up, Natan Levy taking on Pete Dead Game Rodriguez. This is a fun fight, 155 pounds. I think this fight got moved back because our guy Pete Rodriguez maybe was not, I think he got sick or something. I don't know if he was able to make 155 pounds on the notice that he had, but now it looks like this fight's going to proceed at 155. And with all due respect, I thought he was a guy that could have lost that weight to get down to 155. So I think that makes sense. I feel like he was carrying a little bit of extra body fat at welterweight. So probably going to see a slimmed down, more athletic looking version of Pete Rodriguez in this fight. That's what I would expect here. it's a tough fight against Natan Levy, who's a natural lightweight, who's got the grappling and wrestling upside, you would think. But from what I can gather, we're seeing a purple belt on the Pete Rodriguez side. It does seem like he's been grappling since he was a kid, on and off. Does seem like he's got really powerful punches on the feet. We just don't know exactly what his ground game is going to look like at this level, against this level of opposition. We don't know what his wrestling is going to look like in terms of holding up. So I think there's a lot of question marks here. I'm definitely going to have to try and dig in and do more due diligence on this fight. But Natan Levy, what I can point out is he hasn't been fighting the best level of competition in the UFC. He fought Genaro Valdez, pretty low level, wasn't able to get the finish. Fought Mike Breeden, pretty low level, wasn't able to get the finish. Then he fought Rafa Garcia, who's proved to be a very tough fight, tough out for a lot of guys, competitive, good cardio, good pace. So I think, this is a little bit more of that even, honest matchmaking. I think it's definitely favoring Levy in terms of fighting he can win with his grappling, but I also think that Pete's a dangerous guy. He's got real power in his hands, and he's a lethal puncher from round one. JDM, Jack Della, that's not really a loss you could hold against the guy, especially if he's moving down to 155. I mean, would Jack Della not absolutely punch a hole in Natan Levy? I think he probably would, unless Natan was able to get a hold of him. Famshi says, I seen him defend one takedown, look decent. Guy has a good frame to defend takedowns. Yeah, I tend to agree. Can Levy get the takedowns to extend it over 1.5? I mean, it's possible, but it's also possible if he gets the takedowns, he gets the sub, So I think that's less likely. Obviously, he's been a decisionator in the UFC, but he does have that lethal nickname. You'd think he'd want to get around to finishing a fight again. He did finish a arm triangle on Contender Series, guillotine choke, and armbar in LFA, and a few regional fights as well. He was able to get finished. So let's see if Natan Levy was able to get his career going here with a big finish over Pete Rodriguez in his first trip down to 155. Or, on the other hand, if Pete Rodriguez is able to reinvent himself as a lightweight after that big Mike Jackson knockout. Next up, folks, we've got Ji Yeon Kim taking on Mandy Bohm. I don't really have strong opinions about this fight off the rip. One of the dumbest bets I ever made was on Mandy Bohm last time. I had information that she was doing well in the gym, that she looked good, that she was making improvements. Thought she did not fight very well. I thought that she did not show the level of improvements I wanted to see. I feel like she tries to fight pretty. I feel like she tries to fight in a way, in a manner in which, she is trying to, look like she's sharp and technical and moving around a lot, doing a lot of these things. And I just don't like it. I don't think it's very effective. I want people, I don't care if you're doing Dan Henderson looking, motions out there, if you're effective when you land. But, she's just not very effective with her strikes right now. And that's a problem for me. On the other side, I think that Ji Yeon Kim is, a little bit hard done by the judging and some other things in this organization. I thought that she beat Jocelyn Edwards. Personally, I bet her against Jocelyn, but also, she just never makes it clear enough. She doesn't fight with a huge margin of victory. She's fought a pretty tough cast of characters, Jocelyn Edwards, Priscilla Cachoeira. She arguably won that fight, but, late optics, a cut on the face, got beat up with elbows. Tough fight for her, though. She ended up losing. Molly McCann has gone on a good streak, probably leveraged some grappling there if my memory serves. And then Alexa Grasso, the champion, so can't hold that against her. But she did lose to Antonina Shevchenko. Her only wins in the UFC are over Nadia Kassem, Melinda Fabian, and Justine Kish. For the love of Mother Mary and Holy St. Joseph, I can't even advocate betting on either one of these ladies. Who are you beating? Who are you beating? Mandy Bohm hasn't beaten anybody, but neither has she. That's just horrendous stuff. Some of the lowest level WMMA you will see in the UFC, in my humble opinion. God bless America. I just hope somebody gets finished so we don't have to watch it for the full 15 minutes. Next up, Gabe Green taking on Brian Battle. I almost wanted to keep this one to myself because I haven't heard nobody talk about it yet this week. But, I also haven't heard anybody else's shows or listen to anything this week. So potentially that's something that will still yet to be seen. But Bryan Battle is actually representing North Carolina here in the great state of North Carolina. I think he's the only guy from NC on the card. Taking on Gabe Green, I want to say is from California. If this Tapology page will load, I'd be happy to let you know. Yeah, he is from Downey, California, taking on Charlotte, North Carolina's own Bryan the Butcher Battle, fighting out of Carolina Combat and Fitness here. He's going to have a 3-inch height advantage and a 4-inch reach advantage, and he's the underdog. I found that very interesting. Obviously, he's fought a little bit of a lower level of competition relative to somebody like Gabe Green, but Bryan Battle, changed his nickname to the Butcher. I like that. I think that Bryan Battle has a lot of, he's got a lot of interesting upside here. He's 2 years younger as well. I don't think he's as easy to finish and put away. And I figured he would be a little bit undervalued potentially coming into this fight because he got rinsed and repeat, taken down, and washed on the ground by Renat Fakhretdinov. I think that this is a fair point by Vamshi to go back to the last fight. And Vamshi, please, if I'm mispronouncing your name at all, pronunciation guide, I would be happy to correct myself. But Vamshi says Ji Young Kim is a better striker and fought good competition. I think that that's totally fair. And I think that that's what we have to take into account. She's fought better fighters. She's looked good in those fights. But Mandy Bohm has been training in Extreme Couture recently, right before her last fight. Sometimes it takes a couple camps before you really start to see transformation in people. So I still want to keep a benefit of the doubt and open-minded approach. But for me, it's just a clear pass fight. That's why I'm just letting that one go. Shout out to our Canadome members that are popping by, chilling with us. Our guy Moyes says, Bohm rhymes with bum. So I think he's saying bum rhymes with bum. All righty. Zach Johnson says, Liam, I need some of what you are on, son. I mean, it's great American coffee, baby. Get some. I made sure I had my pot of brewing before we got the stream started today. Got the odds mug sipping. You know it. Let's go. Vamshi says, I think Battle needs space. Gabe Green constantly puts pressure on in boxing range, doesn't back up much. Going to be a good fight. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that Battle, the one thing about him, I've heard a lot of gym stories about Bryan Battle being very diligent in the gym, being an extremely hard worker, having very, very good cardio, pushing at an incredible pace, and getting much better time over time in the grappling. And all those things are very promising to me. I think that in this fight, he's got the big frame. He might want to leverage that into some cage control. He might want to leverage that into some takedowns. He might want to leverage that into some clinch opportunities because I think he's really dangerous from the clinch. And I also think he's got good kicks. He's long. It wasn't too long ago he turned Takashi Sato into an absolute statue. So he is a big hitter when he does have that space, like you mentioned. I think Gabe's going to try and push the pace on him. But you got to remember as well, guys with length have given Gabe a lot of problems in the past. Ian Garry was able to keep him mostly at length, use space, movement, footwork to outpoint him. Then you look at guys in the past, Jalen Turner absolutely put it on him in round one and got him out of there. So I think that, he's got good skills, but got to be really diligent here as well. And look at what Bryan brings to the table. He's a constantly improving guy, pretty marketable guy from the local area. I just think lots to like about Bryan Battle as an underdog this weekend. Certainly not going to be, sneezing too much at that opportunity. Next up, we've got Jessica Rose Clark taking on Tainara Lisboa. This is the last fight on the card, guys. So after this, we'll do some Q&A. We can talk process. We can talk upcoming fights. We can talk whatever you guys want. But believe it or not, I've actually done a bunch of research on this fight for whatever reason. I think that this is potentially a higher level fight than that other fight that we talked about in the WMMA scene. I'm half kidding, but either way, right? I actually think that Tainara Lisboa is an interesting prospect, right? And you don't often say that about 32-year-old MMA fighters coming in off the scene. But I think that we've seen a number of fighters that are from the world of kickboxing, from the world of wrestling, from the world of judo, other martial arts disciplines make the transition a little bit later in life, but they acquire the skills that they need along the way and they can really put something together and be talented fighters. I think that Jessica Rose Clark, if you examine her UFC career with a fine tooth comb, it's just not a very high level UFC fighter. And I don't know that I'm breaking any news. I'm not trying to be a jerk either. I think she's, 11-8 as a professional. She's 4-4 overall in the UFC, and she's 2-4 in her last 6 fights. So she beat, Beck Rawlings, who I believe is 8-9 as a professional, and had a negative record in the UFC, like 2-5 or something. Like, she beat her by split decision, right? She's beaten a number of fighters by very close decisions, and I think that that's all something to be very weary of, right? We want to be super weary when Jessica Rose Clark. Yeah, I think that my guy Jack Attack is making a valid point. She's been subbed twice in the first round. She looks like she's regressing. She used to fight at 125. Then she had a hard time making weight. Then she starts showing up for fights at 135. She's getting bodied physically in the wrestling, which is supposed to be her point of strength. That's a real problem for me. So I feel like Lisboa, you can go back and look. And yeah, I think that Zach makes a fair point here, which is, for argument's sake, I think Clark can win based on experience. She's had 8 fights in the UFC, no doubt. She's had 19 fights overall, no doubt. And as you know, she has enough red flags to pass in this fight. 2 old ladies fighting, he says, and it's at 135, which is correct. So earlier in the week, if you guys were looking, this said 125. And I was really surprised by that, because you'd expect that this fight would be at 135. Both ladies most recently fought at 135. And Jessie just missed weight a number of times, had a collapse, passed out missing weight. So a lot of really serious implications with her moving back to 125. I was going to hammer the Lisboa side if this was at 125 for sure. And want to just say shout out to all the people in the chat. Lexi hasn't been by in a while, but always appreciate when we have a lady in the chat. Doesn't happen every day, so appreciate you stopping by, Lexi. Thanks for being here. Good to see you as well, my friend. Eagles 1985 says, "What's up, Liam? Thought on Natan? I missed the early part." So I think that Natan has a clear grappling path. I think that's what he's going to try and leverage. But I think we've got a lot of unknowns on the Rodriguez side. So the line is a little bit wide for me based on the fact that Natan has gassed out a little bit in some of his fights. But I do think he's a more proven grappler on paper, so to speak. And I do think that he's got interesting entries on the feet. I don't think his wrestling's bad at all. But I think that the fact he hasn't been able to finish these fights and put anybody away is a concern. So thank you for being here, Eagles. And if you want more info about that fight, I will timestamp this entire conversation after the fact, and you'll be able to go back and check that out. So the next thing to talk about here for the Jessica Rose Clark and Tainara Lisboa, Ty Painter, what a great nickname as well, Ty Painter. So this girl, let's talk about first, why is she here? She has fought opponents with a combined record of 3-6. Okay, in her combined fights. But again, this is why I always say you got to go through the fine tooth comb. You got to really peel it apart. And the UFC in recent years, if you guys haven't picked up on this trend, you got to pick up on it right now. They tell prospects beat anybody, beat any living body, get a highlight reel, get a couple wins, do something, and we'll sign you. Get a couple finishes, and we'll sign you. Fight your local cab driver and we'll sign you. But it's not, go challenge yourself against the very best people. They want you to do that in the UFC, if anything. They're like, yeah, come do that over here. But as far as they're concerned, they want people that have fun, resume, highlight, something they can sell. That's it. That's all you need. And a couple good wins that we can market. So this girl started training in 2016 for MMA. She was Ty Panther, not Painter. It says Ty Painter. Oh my God. It's a misspelling on Tapology. They don't have the H. I thought it was Painter. Either way, I think it's cool. Well, Damon, thanks for shouting it out. Ty Panther, not Painter. I'm saying blame Tapology on this one. I'm holding it against them. They just made me look foolish, but they do not have the H in there. It just says Ty Panther, and I thought Painter made more sense. Either way, golly. Overall, right? This girl fought Valentina Shevchenko like 10 years ago, right? So right away, you got selling points off the rip. She's fought credible fighters a long time ago. She's clearly been around the combat sports world for a long time. You can find the old pictures of them. They both look very young there. Then you find her MMA debut is against Norma Dumont at featherweight. And we know Norma Dumont to be a competent enough grappler, a confident, wrestler. And in that fight, she was getting beat up. She was getting hammered on the feet with big shots, touched up, bing, bang, boom. And she was having a really tough time dealing with that pressure. She was having a really tough time dealing with those shots. And she was getting nervous. She was trying to grab a hold of the clinch. She was getting beat up with knees to the body. And then Norma Dumont grabbed a hold of the rear waist cinch. And it was comical, guys. You could tell that this girl had not been training jiu-jitsu. She had not been training much wrestling and grappling. She got taken down. She got back up. She got taken down. She got back up. She got taken down. She got back up. Then she cut her back with like a foot cut back, then sat her into the guard and got the rear naked choke. And I'm telling you guys, you can tell a lot by how a fighter reacts. This girl, Norma Dumont, reacted like, how did I just win this fight? She was like elated, like, I can't believe I just won. And the other girl, Lisboa, was literally like, I can't believe I just lost that fight. How did I just lose? And that was at the time that she realized, I need to know jiu-jitsu. You could see she commented on like YouTube videos of herself, like, yeah, it really pays to know jiu-jitsu, right? Like, or something like that. Like, she is very cognizant of the fact that in order for her to bridge the gap, she's a Muay Thai world champion. She's fought Valentina Shevchenko in pure striking. She's fought a lot of pure Muay Thai, pure striking stand-up bouts. You can find them on the internet. So also, by the way, in those Muay Thai fights, how did Valentina Shevchenko beat her? By taking her down over and over. So now this girl has learned to do jiu-jitsu, and she's a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I feel like she's going to use that to try and keep this fight upright and to try and beat this girl up on the feet and hammer her with big knees, big elbows, big shots. And I think Jessie Jess is going to be very desperate to get takedowns here. I think if she does not get them, I think it's going to be a very long night at the office, a very hard fight for her to win. I think she's going to be in for a very tough night. So, yeah, I think Lisboa, you look at the win she has, they're not very meaningful in MMA. You can go back and look at my tweet about her debutante status. I didn't say she's got meaningful MMA wins, but she's been fighting relevant combat sports fights for a long time. And then she gets signed to the UFC right away. No contender series, this and that. Just come right in, fight a girl that's been finished in the first round, her last two fights. Like, I don't know, man. Just for me, they would prefer if Lisboa came in here and was a real prospect than if Jessica Rose Clark got back on track here at 35. I believe she's had knee surgery. She's had problems making weight. She's had problems at this new weight class. And Lisboa, this is kind of like, let's talk about for one brief second, the Aljo and Cejudo fight. What was the biggest dynamic there, in my opinion, that decided the wrestling? It was that Aljo was a little bit bigger. He was a little bit stronger. So when he wanted to pull Henry in, he could pull Henry in. Henry did the right things. He split his legs. He did everything right. And Aljo still picked him up and put him down anyway. So strength, size, it really matters. And this girl, Lisboa, fought at 145 for most of her fights and then gradually has come down to 135. Right? When I heard she was going down to 125, I was like, damn, that's got to be a serious lifestyle commitment. She's big, she's tall, she's rangy. It's not happening. She's doing it at 135. Okay. Jessica Rose Clark, on the other hand, used to fight at 125, and now she's up at 135. I don't know. That doesn't bode very well for me. She has won a fight at 145 before as well, so it's not like she's tiny, but I do think that Jessica Rose Clark is a 500 fighter, and she's fighting a girl who I think projects a lot higher than her overall. So I like the Tainara Lisboa side. I think she's going to get the job done as a debutante. Next is what you guys have to say. Any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts that you guys have about this fight card, upcoming fight cards, things that you want to get off your chest, questions about news, bookings, cancellations, anything like that. We could talk process, but we'll give it about 15 more minutes here. We'll roll it till 1 o'clock PM Eastern. So 13 minutes still on the clock. And if y'all don't have anything specific for me, that's okay. I'll come up with some things that we could talk about real quick. Maybe share my screen and show you guys some of the stuff that I've been working on for this card. But what's beautiful is we actually have a card in this case where there's only one debutante. So that girl Lisboa that I was just talking about is the only debutante on this card. And for me, I normally have notes on fighters that are in the UFC, but I don't always have, the ability to get after it. Great question. Favorite prop on the card. So let me pull up best fight odds here. The problem that I was having was I was looking last night before I was going to record the show and before my headache just got absolutely outrageous. Oh, snap. Now they've released some U.S. domestics. Okay. Now we've got a chance at some lines here. I had not seen any props released on U.S. domestics. I'm now seeing FanDuel has released odds on some of these fights. So I'm going to be digging into the odds more here, but just instinctually, let's look at the card and see any props I like. So first and foremost, Jailton Almeida by sub in round 1. I was just talking about proof of concept. That we do not have for this outcome. We do not have proof of concept for Rozenstruik getting submitted in the first round, but it's only plus 230. It's come down. Yeah, it opened plus 265. Almeida by sub in round 1. Almeida by KO in round 1 is as high as plus 475. And I would not rule that out. Think about Islam Makhachev, Bobby Green. It's not like he got beat up and he could, Bobby Green ends up standing up and grabbing a hold of him, walking away. It's just he couldn't move. He's getting held down on the ground. A positional TKO like that is very viable here with somebody like Jailton. I just think he's so much higher level on the ground. And we've seen, he blasts people in the face with his ground and pound too. He's not afraid of doing that. He's happy to open up with those shots. So I think that that's something interesting to watch out for. Who is this? Gabe Green by sub is plus 1,200. You're welcome, Liam. All right, Contender View. Interesting call. I don't think it's going to be easy to put away somebody like Bryan Battle. I'll tell you the truth, man. I don't think that's going to be easy at all, but I do think Gabe Green pushes a hard pace. Do think he's a tough guy, but this is Bryan Battle's backyard, his hometown. I don't think he's going to be tapping out too easy, bro. You're going to have to put that guy down for real. So Gabe Green, tough guy though, so not counting him out by any means. And you guys will see by Thursday, I will come back with some more research and a little bit more ironed out on these. But just gut level feel for me was guy in his backyard with a lot of physical intangibles as an underdog. That's something I don't want to look past. Scam the Book says, how about them Lakers, bro? That the futures have been aging just dandy for me on the Lakers side of things, and great cash out equity, great futures equities, things that really make a difference. So I have a ton of different free bets on the Lakers. Mostly that's how I targeted it. Just any free bet I would get in my accounts, put it on the Lakers, put it on the Lakers Western Conference, put it on the Lakers series bets and things like this. And so far, so good. That's what I'll say. So far, so good. Happy with how it's turned out. A lot of my futures bets have aged all right, and some of them not so much. So for me, the Lakers one has probably been the best call, but my picks on the entire West Coast were perfect through the first round. So yeah, man. I'm not very good with the day-to-day in the NBA and the MLB and these other kind of sports, but because of some of the skills I've acquired from MMA and from reading markets, I'm getting much better at reading futures markets and trying to predict where value is going to be and thinking about it as a theoretical problem, as a probabilistic problem, and also as a narrative basis. And I felt like the Lakers for me checked a lot of those boxes. Newly reconstructed team with a huge narrative basis, but this is an MMA show, so I'll get back to it. But Scam the Books, I appreciate you, my dog. Those have aged quite well for me, my man, and I'm excited. Just the Western Conference would be, over 5 units, probably closer to the 10 unit number in terms of the return for me on that. So it would just be insane. And I'd be very, very happy camper. Thoughts on Andrade sub at plus 1,800? One thing I always try to avoid is mushing my favorite bets before they get released on U.S. domestics. But a couple of you guys are the sharpest chat in the game, and I say it each and every time. Tyler Waits waiting in with Andrade sub at plus 1,800. I mean, my brother, I think that's a misprice between you and me and the 41 people listening and everybody who listens after this. Don't want to give away too much of the game, but yeah, man, I think that's a misprice personally. I think that on top of that, I want to shout out my guy, Grateful Dude. I wonder if he's still in the chat with us. Glenn Bot, a lot of great people. Our guy Moy's laughing at the fact I said living body. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that is basically what they tell people. My guy AWMD says he like Garry to get the W. I do. Biased as hell, Irish as hell, but I like our guy Garry to get the W. Zach Johnson says, I think Natan grapples all day. I think that's very plausible. That's what he's going to be bringing to the table. That's what he's going to be trying to leverage here. That's his best skill set. I think that's all stuff to consider. So shout out to a lot of the great people that have contributed. Cole Stein as well. Daniel likes the heat to get it done. Shout out Daniel. I mean, it's certainly looking that way, ain't it? Jimmy has been playing out of his shoes, man. Just very good stuff from him. I'm scrolling through the chat to see if anybody else has asked any questions that we've missed. But guys, if you got questions, comments, concerns, still got 6 minutes here. And I think that, a lot of great stuff. Our guy Marcel, free bets they're offering thousands now to get out. I hear you, my man. They want to buy those back, right? They don't want those out in the futures streets anymore. Jake says, thanks so much for the insight. I need to keep better track of my bets, taking more notes so I can trend how my feelings to see what the fighter does in the cage. Absolutely. And you always want to compare your bets with the performance and then say, was it something I could have accounted for? Was it something like, for example, if you bet Gilbert Burns, I mean, could you really expect that he was going to be injured there? I mean, it's tough. No, I felt like on the other side, they got me. They got me because I was going to bet Bilal Muhammad, and I ended up talking myself out of it because of the injury concerns. But I didn't get myself to the Gilbert Burns side either because I liked his attitude. I liked his mindset. He said, people are going to say after this fight, how do you do this with all the stuff he had to overcome and the fact he didn't have a camp and the fact he did it with 3 weeks and the fact he did it with this and the fact he wanted to go 5 rounds. And they're going to say, how do you do it all? And, I'm just going to do it because I always do. And I was like, damn, like gangster talk, gangster walk from Bilal. And he did it once again. So, I haven't always been the biggest Bilal Muhammad fan, but he's been pretty undeniable. Shout out to our guy Gold Cap says, hi, Liam. Always tuning in. Appreciate that, my man. I appreciate you tuning in. And you're looking for Morono by sub. It's going to be a good plus money number, I would expect as well. Definitely over 6-1 there. David Dean says in the comments, and he did very well on our guy Aljamain Sterling, if memory serves. So if so, shout out, brother. Great call. I thought it was close as could be, but I thought that at the end of the day, Aljamain Sterling was the side. I think the fade Ian Machado has come with D-Rod, but age and volume difference are making me hesitant. Yeah, man, I truthfully do not. I feel the opposite, but I'm also a little bit biased. I do like the Irish guys. I do think that when you look at Ian Garry and the skills that he's putting together, I feel like he's been trying to show off his striking. And I think we can see that change here a little bit. After the way he got rocked in his last fight, I think, he needed to prove a point there that he could come back with this striking and win it. But I think he might be a little bit more savvy in this fight, pursue some takedowns and mix up his game a little bit more. And I think if he does that, he's just a little bit younger, a little bit fresher product. I think he can exert his skills and his leverage. Cole Stein says, if Olberg actually looks like minus 400 in the fight, I assume he'll get the finish at a high clip, right? Yeah, I mean, you'd have to think so. He's a big power guy. But we also can't forget that it was 2 fights ago he's going to the distance with Fabio Chiron, right, who I don't think has gone the distance with anybody since. So it's like Olberg kind of was a little bit hesitant there, wanted to prove he could fight 15 minutes. He's had a couple guys that ran into him in his last couple fights. think he's going to get a little bit more of a sophisticated approach here from Ihor. I think everybody thinks he sucks. Maybe he does completely suck, but I do think he's going to be a little bit more patient and try and pick his spots and try and find angles. And I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to wrestle and grapple a little bit if he has any semblance of a brain. So, yeah, I think that Ulbrich would probably have to knock him out in the first round to look minus 400, or he'd just have to jab him up at distance and never get into a clinch exchange at all. Garry, decision or ITD, do you favor? Eileen, decision. D-Rod, tough as F. Would love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that he's tough as F, but I also think timing is everything in mixed martial arts. And I think when you're getting finished by Neil Magny, Ian Garry is certainly live to finish you. That's my personal opinion. I think that Ian Garry is good on the ground. I think he's a dangerous fighter. He doesn't have the experience of Neil Magny, but I do think that he can push cardio pace as well. I do think that he's well conditioned. I do think that he's ready to advance his career. So, yeah, for me, I think that, you're not going to get plus 680 like you did on Neil Magny, or like I did on Neil Magny to win inside the distance. But I think that, again, I've called Neil Magny a fish before. You're getting submitted by a fish. I'm a little bit skeptical, hippo-eyed, about maybe the level of preparation, not the level of skill, but just, are you ready to go 15 hard minutes every time at a grappling pace? I don't know. So for me, I think it's a very competitive fight, guys. Don't misunderstand me, but who do I think is more likely to be there at the end of 15 minutes, ready to get their hand raised and ready to finish? I think Ian Garry is probably likely to be that guy. Stamen walks right through Andrade this weekend. I think he's turned a corner. What are your thoughts? I'll rewatch his footage and see if my opinion changes, but I disagree. I think that Andrade is a really hard fight for everybody in the division. I think that it's possible he could get out wrestled here, but I also think he's got huge power on the feet. I think he's a dangerous grappler. I think he's dangerous in transition. And I think we've seen, as recently as the Said Nurmagomedov fight and that ninja choke, Cody just go out there and have flat performances where he looks a little bit like deer in the headlights and it's a little bit too predictable. So I think it's a great fight, but yeah, I think it's a great fight. I just think I would not be so bullish on Cody Stamen because we've seen up and down performances from him throughout his career, but I'm going to go back and watch and I'm going to do my due diligence. Probably not. I've burnt probably 0.5 units betting on Ian Garry to win by sub in the UFC, but I might go back to the well and bet another quarter unit on it, depending on the number, because I think eventually it's going to happen, man. I think, number one, he's got the arms for it. He's got the skills for it. And I also think that, the UFC, as much as they like knockouts and fun stuff like that, they want to know that you've got a well-rounded game so they can move you up the card and fight real guys. And I think that would be a big step for him to prove that he's got a great ground game. And I believe D-Rod is a black belt in the 10th Planet system. So I think it would be a big feather in his cap if he was able to go out there and get this up here. So after his last fight, kind of proving a point with the ego striking, I think he might go out there and be a little bit more tactical, a little bit smarter, and pursue some grappling here. Maybe take some notes from our guy, Neil Magny, leverage those long limbs. Okay. Yeah, I think so too, man. I think he's going to get finished here. I think that Carl Williams, he's had a lot of opportunities to finish, and he's been annoying in the fact that he hasn't finished. I did tell him to go out there. I was like, dude, you're fighting an absolute fish on the ground. Go out there and submit him. So for me, yeah, I think that more often than not here, 1-9 as an underdog is Chase Sherman. I just think he's going to get finished here by Carl Williams. I think Carl's going to get on top whenever he wants. I think he's going to beat him up from on top. I think Chase eventually is going to want out of there, give his back, and reluctantly he's gonna be like, I guess I got to finish him now. Guess I don't get to fight 15 minutes, but I think Carl's going to reluctantly submit Chase Sherman this weekend. Any last questions, guys? We've got my guy Scam the Books pointing out, seems everyone wants to fade Garry this week. Line only getting wider. Yeah, I would tend to agree. But again, we could see that change as limits open up later in the week. So will be interesting to see how that market plays out. If you catch the books right, says my guy Marcel, they'll have a split open a little bit after the fight start. I listen for the judges. LOL, you're welcome. I like what you're saying there. If they're hanging the number, take advantage. I bet minus 150 on Morozov versus Andrade, and I feel like it should naturally get me to bet Stamen here but man, it's hard to pull the trigger. Yeah, I think that, do you feel good about that bet in hindsight? That's one thing you got to ask yourself. If you think it was the right bet to make, then no problem. But if you think, you know what, maybe that was too aggressive in a bet against this guy, then maybe this isn't the time to pull the trigger again. I do think he's just so dangerous, man. He's underrated for how dangerous he is. But, we've also seen he could fold up shop. He could get beat. He could get out wrestled. So do you think he retires with a loss? I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. He is 37, could retire, but I mean, I don't know. 28-5, that doesn't seem like the record of a guy who needs to retire either. He could definitely get some more fights in the UFC. He's really tough out. It hasn't proven to be an easy win. I'm sure the UFC put that together thinking Sergey Morozov maybe had something for him, and Douglas just dug deep and beat him up. He's a tough guy, man. All right, guys. I think that should do it for today. So, guys, thank you all for being here very much. I appreciate everybody's support. Appreciate everybody that checked out the show. Sorry that we could not make it last night. Just was dealing with a headache. Could not do it. But today, feeling great. Getting right back to work with a lot more stuff coming your way. So if you guys are not already following me on social media at Liam Picks Fights, that would be a great place to start. Going to be dropping a lot more information about UFC Charlotte in the coming days. If you guys are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you get subscribed. Going to be talking later this week with my guy Rich. Going to be doing the show, same bat time, same bat channel, around 3:30. Got some surprises in store as well. Going to be trying to put out more content on this channel. I mentioned it before, but I want to get some feedback on this because I don't want to make it and then have nobody watch it. If you guys want to see a video on Jailton Almeida's chances of being a UFC heavyweight champion or being a UFC champion overall, go ahead and drop that in the comments below. I appreciate everybody who salutes in the chat, but in the comment section, it will give me a chance to go back, read, respond, and give you some thoughtful feedback. But also, if that's not what you want to see, if you want to see more of something else, if you want to see more about betting process, if you want to see more about something specific, go ahead and drop that in the comments as well. I will get back to you. I will answer every comment. So thank you guys so much for your time, attention, and your feedback. Got a lot of really positive feedback on Liam's first look last week. So maybe we don't have the same quality of fights as the pay-per-view offering. But like I said, only one debutante. So a lot of fighters that I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with their style, their game. But I'm going to freshen up my research. I'm going to make sure I have all my ducks in a row. And then the Just Win Baby podcast on Thursday is when I'm going to come back to you with a well-thought-out breadth of opinions. And I'm going to be excited to share those with you. So picks, predictions, bets, all that stuff. If you guys want all my information as it comes out throughout the week, I already have hundreds of pages of notes on fighters that are on these cards coming up in the next few weeks. So I'm just excited. More research being done. Tinara Lisboa going into the database as well. So yeah, fired up. A lot of great work to do this week. So bounce back week underway. Also, if you guys are looking for more of the content I've done, I did do a show with my guy Clint, Die Hard MMA on his channel yesterday. So that was another first look for me in a lot of senses, but I had done enough due diligence, enough research to go out there and give my opinions. However, again, it's going to get refined over the course of the week. So excited here to continue to break down these fights. I think that for a fight night, it makes it so much more exciting when we get out of the Apex, when we get in front of UFC fans, when we get a live attendance, people yelling, people cheering. I think it motivates the fighters. I think it brings out a different energy in the events. And I think that even at the pay-per-view over the weekend, I thought it made a difference. So the main card kind of tapered off a little bit in terms of the entertainment value. But, we really saw a really compelling preliminary card. We saw a lot of fun finishes. We saw a pretty high level offering. That's what I want to see. If you guys ever see me criticizing the UFC, criticizing the business practices, things like that, it's because I'm a consumer. I'm a fan at the end of the day. I've been a fan for a very long time. And so I want the best fights that we can get. I want the fights to be, structured in a way where we're not sitting around waiting all night for the action. I want things to flow with continuity. I want them to tell the stories of the fighters. I want, fair betting opportunities and integrity. And that's it. As long as we're getting fairly adjudicated fights, run out there, the best fighting the best. That's what I want to see from the UFC. And I think that most of us can agree on that. That's what I want to bet on as well. I think that that's the funnest challenge is breaking down high-level fights. So we got a lot of great opportunities this weekend and a lot of great opportunities coming up. So drop a like on the video if you haven't already. Get subscribed to the channel. If you want more from me, there's a ton more information in this description box below. All the different places you can find me, all the different places I'm doing work. Also, guys, I write articles for Action Network. I contribute to the Prop Squad. If you guys like written content and information, I'm happy to do more of that as well. Thinking about starting my own kind of newsletter for MMA. So if that's something you'd be interested in, drop that in the comments below, something you'd like to see. I'd be more than happy to engage with you guys on any of those topics. And you guys can contact me as well on social media at Liam Picks Fights everywhere. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to call it here. Shout out to my guy, Mushroom MMA on the way out. What's up, Liam? Trying to sneak this watch at work. Sharp as fuck. Appreciate you, my guy. And appreciate all the kind words from people in the chat. Thank you, Liam. Appreciate you. Good luck this weekend, says Vamshi. And thank you, my man. Peter says, thank you. You are the man, brother. Enjoy the day. Grateful dude. Appreciate the breakdowns. Best of luck this weekend. Tyler, appreciate the show and all the hard work. You guys are the best, man. Truly appreciate each and every one of you guys. Santiago says, how long does it take you to study a fight on average? This would be a great question, but I'll tell you this, man. It depends on the fight, and it depends on my interest level in betting, because sometimes it only takes me a little while to know I'm going to pass on this fight, so I don't need to do as much research, as much due diligence, just enough to form a pick, a prediction, and say maybe, hey, this isn't my favorite bet, this isn't my favorite lean, this isn't my favorite whatever, but this is my gut level reaction, this is what I feel about the fight. And other times, you know, if it's a really compelling fight, it might take a lot of study, it might take a lot of analysis. You know, even Tainara Lisboa, for example, I don't know who she is. I don't know what her work is. I have to go back and watch her Muay Thai fights from 2012. I have to go back and watch her MMA debut against Norman Dumont. But then other fighters on the card, Jessica Rose Clark, I have 3-4 of her fights already taped out. She's been in the UFC a long time. She's had many fights in the banner. So those kind of fighters, I already know something about them. I already have something written down. I already have things I can refer to. It's not as long for me to do Jesse Jess research as it is for me to do Tainara Lisboa research. So when you have 6-7 debutantes like we've had on some of these recent UFC cards, man, that's a lot of work for me. That's a lot of research for me, especially for people that are coming and going to the UFC that are very low level. Whereas if we can get in quality fighters that we know are going to stick around for years, then I'm happy to do all the research and go back and watch every fight they've had and catalog it all out and really see their progression over time. That's how you see patterns emerge in fighters. You know, you can see things that they're liable to. Oh, they get hit with this shot all the time. These are pattern recognition, I think, is the number one way to win at betting. And you can do that in odds markets. You can do that in fighters. Fighters are pattern-based creatures. So just certain things to keep in mind there. Some words of wisdom for the way out. Note takers are money makers. Lifelong learners or lifelong earners. And God bless each and every one of you guys. Enjoy the fights. Until next time, take care, everybody.